But our first question comes from William Brougham.
Hello, Tony. Hello, panel. Does the panel believe that somebody's sexuality, in light of the Ian Thorpe interview, is nobody's business? Or do people, particularly in the public eye, have a duty to come out to make it easier and to enable younger people, or people of all ages, to come out and break any boundaries of homophobia?
Charlie Pickering, let's start with you.
I'm not making an announcement.
Unless you feel like it.
I don't think it's anyone's right to say that anyone should or should not need to communicate their sexuality to the world. I don't think anyone should feel obliged to communicate their sexuality to the world. That said, I feel nothing but happy for Thorpe, feeling comfortable enough to come out. I also feel a bit almost heartbroken that he felt for so long that he couldn't.
Is it clear to you why he felt that?
Why he felt that he couldn't? No, I think only he would know in a very detailed way, and it'd be almost impossible to communicate with words, even in a long-form interview or anything like that. I think Australia has changed significantly since he was a 15-year-old world champion, since he won gold medals at the 2000 Olympics. Australia is moving towards being more understanding, but I mean, if I can remember correctly, Mr. Ruddock, you introduced the legislation to ban same-sex marriage in this country, and that was not long after the Olympics, where Thorpe was a national hero, but in his own country, laws were being passed that would disenfranchise him, that would mean that his relationship, whatever it was, would not be treated the same as anyone else. And God, I wouldn't want to put up my hand in that environment. I would feel very intimidated if my country had laws that didn't recognise my relationship equally.
Philip Ruddock, do you want to respond to that?
Well, the only point,
obviously to the question.
The first point I would make is that I am opposed to any form of discrimination, and it's whether it's race, sexuality, like matters. The question about marriage, I think, is a different question. The fact that you don't want to see people discriminated against in their life and the way in which they live it doesn't mean that in relation to marriage, which has a particular purpose, that you should fundamentally change the nature of it.
But the questioner asks, just to go back to that, whether people with a high profile like Ian Thorpe have a kind of duty to talk about their sexuality rather than to, in a way, mislead people about it, as he did for a long time.
Well, I don't know that you have a duty to disclose anything, but I don't know that you have an obligation to hide it. I certainly wouldn't think that people should be so obliged. I mean, for me, I've employed people who are gay. I've got friends who are gay. I've got relatives who are gay. I am not judgmental about those matters.
So how would their marriage be different to another marriage?
Because
you've worked with them, you've been up close, you know.
Well, no, I think that marriage was ordained in that sense to provide a basis for the nurturing of children primarily. And while it is argued that the expectation that there should be role models, both male and female, in those sorts of relationships obviously don't apply where somebody's widowed. And if there are people who come together who want to have children, and you know, sometimes when people reorganise their affairs, as they do because of the change in circumstances, children are in those relationships. It doesn't mean that you have to fundamentally change the nature of marriage itself, it seems to me.
Philip Ruddock, I'll steer away from gay marriage for the moment. Just stick with the question, Tania.
I'd just like to say, good on him. I mean, his sexuality is his own business. It's not my business, given that he's a high-profile Australian. But I think the important issue here is the fact that mental illness and depression, and a lot of our young people are struggling with that, and that at the forefront with his profile, bringing across mental illness and depression is more important than his sexuality, and that services and programs and support services should be in place for young people rather than worrying about whether he's gay or not. I mean, I'm black, I'm a woman. If I only had a disability and I'd be lesbian, I'd tick all minority groups.
Tim Hawkes.
I'm delighted that Thorpe has laid his demons to rest. At least I hope he has, Tony. But I think that there has been a missed opportunity. I think if Thorpe...
On his part.
On his behalf. When I think of the sort of the positive influence he could have had on so many young people who are struggling with this issue. It's all very well now, him coming out, and I'm glad he has. But look, you can't criticise anyone unless you've walked a mile in their shoes, and trust me, his shoes are huge, and I couldn't walk in those. But it's very easy to carp and criticise from the side. But you know, if he'd come out a little earlier and not particularly written this book, you know, his book, you know, This Is Me, well, it's not me. And in there, he sort of says, I get really upset that people criticise and suggest that I might be a closet gay. And he gets really upset about that. And he says, you know, if I was, I'd come out and say so. So I find that element of duplicity a little disappointing. And I also, to be honest, when I was reading today, that one of the reasons why he hadn't come out earlier had to do with money, and I just, that's not a really good reason. And you know, the fact that he picked up $400K, you know, for doing the Parkinson interview as well, it didn't go down too well. I think there are probably other arenas, other opportunities for him to have come out a little earlier. And gee, that would have had a wonderful impact. As it is, it's still a good impact. He's still being brave, I think. But it would have been, I think for me, I would have loved him to have been honest a little earlier.
Let me ask you about this. One of the 10 conversations you must have with your son is about helping boys find out who they are. I mean, do you encourage young gay men at the King's School to come out, and are there support groups for them, or is there a support network if they do?
Well, we certainly have support. It is interesting that certainly there have been one or two occasions. I remember a boy who had been struggling with this issue and of his own sexuality, and he was becoming rebellious and non-compliant, and therefore his shadow came across my study floor, together, I might just say, with that of his parents. And he was being fairly difficult, and then all of a sudden he blurted out, "I'm gay!" And we looked at him and we said, "Yeah, well, we've suspected that for some time, but what's the problem? What's your problem?" And I think that's so, it's so important to be accepting of different people's sexuality. And there's no question.
Is one of the problems that he might actually get bullied at school?
Well, I think there is always that fear. And there is no question that remains one of the blights of society. And certainly I've also helped parents deal with it, and I give them the hug, thank and go mantra. So hug them, say thank you, and hug them, and then thank your son for sharing that you know, that raw honesty with you, and then probably go for a little, you know, walk the dog for about 10 minutes, lest you say something which you may regret. Go and lower the meniscus of a single malt or something for 10 minutes, and then reconnect and talk about the past. For how long have you been feeling this way? Just a factual acquisition. Talk about the present, how you're feeling now. And talk about the future. You know, how is it that we're going to tell your sister, and so on. And I think those sorts of, that bit of scaffolding can really help when you're dealing with a difficult and sensitive issue like this, Tony.
TANIA, please.
Well, two things, I think. I think what a bunch of knockers we are that this young man's done this incredibly brave thing. Great swimmer, articulate young man, gorgeous. Comes out and tells a secret that he's kept for so long, and half the people are going, "Oh, he should have said it sooner." I mean, what a bunch of knockers. I think it's terrific. I think it's terrific that he's had the confidence to do it now. I'm so sorry we live in a society that as a young teenager he felt he couldn't do it, but I don't blame someone who in their very early teens is thrust into the public spotlight, takes a position and then gets into a sort of cycle of defending the position that they've taken. It is so completely explicable in a society that has so much discrimination and bullying and violence towards gay men and lesbians, transgender, bisexual, intersex people, that someone would not feel that they're comfortable disclosing, and it is nobody else's business. I think he's a great role model. He's always been a great role model. He's gone up in my estimation for being so brave now, and I think anybody who's knocking him should take a chill pill.